Hey everyone, today I'll be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. So if you aren't super familiar with Booktube and book tags, these are the kind of videos where you are given a set of questions that you are going to answer and then you can tag other people to do it. But usually I don't really tag other people, so we're just going to answer the questions. The mid-year book freakout tag is meant to kind of take a look back on the past first half of the year and share some of my favorites, some of the disappointments, and that sort of thing. It's a way to just kind of check in and not have to wait all the way to the end of the year to share your favorites or some of the worst reads that you've had. So yeah, let's get into the questions. The first question is, what is the best book that you've read so far this year? And without a doubt, that is for me, As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Kato. This is one of the very few books to make me actually sob physically. And then there was just so many parts of the story where I was just tearing up. And then there was a certain part, just the climax and the plot twist, where I just immediately started sobbing. I couldn't control myself. This book follows Salama, who is actually a pharmacy or pharmacist student. Because of the Syrian revolution, all of her future plans have been put on hold, and she is kind of forced to be a doctor in the midst of this revolution. And this follows her dilemma on whether or not to stay in Syria or try to escape and take refuge somewhere else. That is all I'm going to say, because I feel like the best way to experience this book is to know as little as possible. There's just one other thing that I probably mentioned because it happens just in the very first chapter. Salama, right off the bat, it's revealed that Salama has this hallucination. She's seeing a certain person. That hallucination of hers is kind of guiding her to make the decision whether to stay or not. So yeah, apart from that, just know that this book is so beautifully written. It is both heartwarming and heart-wrenching. Truly, I could not believe that this was Zulfa Kato's debut novel because it was written so well. The characters were just... my heart went out to them. They were just well written. And this is just a story that will stay with me for a very long time. And I want to reread it pretty soon. The next question is, what is the best sequel that you've read so far? I haven't read a ton of sequels this year, but I think the best that I've read so far has to be Jade War from Fonda Lee. This is the second book in the Greenbone Saga series, starting with Jade City, then Jade War, and then Jade Legacy. I know a lot of people love this series, and I do too. I enjoy it so much. Even though the world building tends to be complex as well as the politics, they're somehow also easy to follow, owing to Fonda Lee's very accessible writing style, which does not necessarily sacrifice quality. Fonda Lee's just a really great writer. I thought Jade War was just a solid follow-up to Jade City, which I enjoyed. I think I rated them both 4 stars though, because even though I respect the series so much, I'm not over the top loving it. Still, this series is just one of those fantasy series that you can just recommend to pretty much anyone. I feel like I did enjoy the sequel less than Jade City though, because you can kind of tell that it's setting up a lot of the events that will happen in Jade Legacy, which is the final book. But again, I still respect it so much. It's such a good series. The other reason I didn't enjoy it as much as I did Jade City is because there were less action scenes in this one. There were still a lot, but there were less than compared to Jade City. This sequel was more focused on the politics, but also the reason that I love this sequel so much is see a lot of the characters that were established in the first book just be thoroughly developed in the second book. The entirety of our main cast develops so much in this book that I'm just excited to see what their fates will be in Jade Legacy. And by excited, I mean I'm terrified. The next question is, what is a recent new release that you have not read yet? And for me, that is The Grimoire of Grave Fates. This is a kind of a collaborative novel with a group of diverse authors. And I think this is kind of like a dark academia / fantasy / murder mystery, where each chapter is told by a different author and they kind of lead to, the grand conclusion. And this just excites me so much because it's a dark academia, murder mystery, fantasy, all things I love and enjoy, as well as it's written by a bunch of prolific, diverse authors. I'm just super excited to get into this one. The next question is, what is your most anticipated release of the year? That has to be Silverborn, The Mystery of Morgan Crow. This is the 4th book in the Nevermore series. Books 1 to 3 of Nevermore were just so solid, and I am so excited for this next book. Nevermore is just, I feel like it's just the next big thing in middle grade fantasy. Even though outside of middle grade circles, I feel like there needs to be more visibility for this series because it's just so good. I'm also super excited because I hear that the first book is being adapted into a movie and it's going to be a musical. So yeah, I cannot wait for Silverborn. The next question is, what is your most disappointing read of the year? And that has to be The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This was pitched by a lot of people as very similar to The House in the Cerulean Sea, And like the premise is very much similar to The House in the Cerulean Sea. In this book, we follow Mika Moon, who is a witch, but in this world, which is actually set in our world, a lot of witches are in hiding. They're not allowed to reveal their identities, but once a year they gather and talk about the things that they've learned. And Mika Moon, she's just so passionate about being a witch that she can barely hide her identity. And so she's an influencer of sorts, and she pretends to be this fake witch online. But one day she's actually discovered by a bunch of people who can tell that she's a real witch, and then they invite her to hire her as a witch who will take care of these 3 adopted kids that they have who are also witches, and they want her to train these new kids who are witches. I feel like I could have explained that better, but I really didn't care for this book that much. This book, I mean, I bought it because it was pitched as very similar to The House in the Cerulean Sea, and I wanted some good vibes, and this cover is kind of pretty, but it was so disappointing. Like, it was not necessarily bad, it was just, my hopes were high up there, because I was just like, oh, I really want some cozy vibes, I want some found family, which it does have. Like, it's pretty cozy, the found family is super sweet, but everything was just lacking. It was just so lackluster. It was so vanilla. Like, I'm not gonna lie, anyone who recommends this highly, I kind of immediately don't trust their bookish opinions, because I'm like, this was just so deeply underwhelming. It also felt very off, because I mean, just like The House in the Cerulean Sea, this is an adult book, and The House in the Cerulean Sea is an adult book, and there is some adult content in both books. But I don't know, this was just a little bit more edgy. Like, with The House in the Cerulean Sea, it felt mostly middle grade, except for certain parts of the book where the adults would have adult conversations, that sort of thing. But this one, whenever there was just more adult content, it just felt super off for some reason. And there's something else that happens here, but I'm not going to spoil, but it's just so out of the blue, and I was just like, this did not need to be in this book. So I'm just going to leave it at that. The next question is, what is the biggest surprise of this year in terms of the books that you've read? And that has to be Awakening Artemis, deepening intimacy with the living earth and reclaiming our wild nature. This was so good. I don't know if you can see the tabs, but this was so dang good. It's a nonfiction, and basically you follow the author like throughout her life. I don't even know how to describe this book. Basically, the author is an herbalist, and she talks about certain plants. And I know this already sounds super boring, but hear me out. She talks about these plants that she's discovered and what these plants have taught her about her life, and how certain traits of these plants reflect on her life and her experiences. I don't know how to describe it. For example, this plant represents healing. It has these like healing properties, and this is how I've learned so much from this plant and been made to reflect on the times that I've needed healing. That sounds like a super watered down, super cheap version of what this book offers, but it was so good. It was so surprisingly good. She discusses a lot of things like sexuality, trauma, like self-awareness, like finding her purpose in life, that sort of thing. Who would I recommend this to? If you're wanting to read a calming nonfiction read that will also, I don't know, this just made me have a deeper appreciation for nature and what nature can teach us. This is probably sounding super boring to you, but it was so good. I don't know how else to describe it. Maybe if you're into plants, this would be a great read. I think that would be a good, solid recommendation. But also, if you just want something calming and super soothing to read, I would highly recommend this. Mind the trigger warnings though, because she does talk a lot about, trauma. But there's just something so healing about this book. She talks so much about healing and self-discovery. I know I'm kind of talking in circles at this point, but it was surprisingly good. I think I rated this 4.5 stars. I don't think I'm going to reread it necessarily, but I am revisiting the parts that I tabbed because there were so many sections of the book that were just super thought-provoking that I want to revisit. So, Awakening Artemis. Next question is favorite author, and that has to be Tillie Walden, the author of On a Sunbeam. Now, I have had a great respect for graphic novels before reading On a Sunbeam. And this is, by the way, my only read from Tillie Walden. I haven't read any of her other works. Like, even before reading this, I had a profound respect for graphic novels and the artists behind them because they have so much art that isn't just, your typical line drawings or whatever. I have so much respect for the art themselves. and how they use art to tell stories. You're not just given art that paints a picture of something, you're given art to move a plot forward, if that makes sense. And I've just respected the art of creating a graphic novel, right? But never on this level as what Tillie Walden offers in this book. And maybe because I'm not necessarily super well read in terms of graphic novels, but this one just blew me away and impressed me on a level that I haven't seen yet. I'm sure there are other better and other graphic novels that are as good as this one, but this one is the first that truly deeply impressed me in terms of its world building and character work. Like, I do not understand what kind of magic that Tillie Walden inserted here. Oh, I don't even want to tell you anything about this book because it's such a journey discovering what it's really about. I'm just gonna say this, it's sci-fi, it's set in space, it involves a crew of characters who are repairing like ruins in different planets or different worlds. It's an all-female cast, and we follow our main character who has made this promise to a different character, and she wants to fulfill that promise. I'm gonna keep it super vague because I promise you, if you just go into this blind and just are there for the ride and the journey and discovering what the book is actually about, it's gonna be so worth it because the art is so beautiful and the world building is so wonderful and fantastic. It's just a beautiful, beautiful graphic novel. And I'm excited for my copy to come in because I just ordered it. The next question is newest fictional crush. Now, I'm not gonna exactly answer this because I haven't really gotten a fictional crush from any of the books that I've read. So I'm gonna change it a little bit and say what is my newest favorite fictional relationship. That has to be the relationship of Jameson and Andrew, or Jamie and Andrew, and All That's Left in the World by Eric J. Brown. These two, I think they're teenagers. This is a YA novel, obviously. They're just so sweet and they care deeply for each other so much. And I was just like blown away by how beautiful their slow burn romance is. This is a post-apocalyptic novel. Major trigger warning, this is a pandemic book. Like, a pandemic just happened and so much of the population was wiped out because of it. That is already super triggering for a lot of people, I understand, so skip this book if that's something that's super triggering for you. But anyway, these kids have been living on their own and surviving on their own, but one day they meet and then they kind of help each other out, but also they wonder if it's time for them to, you know, branch out and try to find civilization, find others who have survived the pandemic, and kind of, you know, rejoin and help build that kind of civilization. It was so beautiful. I think I rated this 4 stars. It was just a solid story. It's not anything over the top impressive, but I just really love the relationship of these two characters. If you have seen the series The Last of Us, which is based on the video game, I haven't finished that series, but I have reached the episode where they focus on this gay couple, Bill and Frank. This is the YA version of that story. Like, it's so beautiful. Like, the way Bill and Frank's relationship is so beautiful, and how they lean on each other to survive this the zombie apocalypse thing that's going on in The Last of Us. That's pretty much how this story goes. So if you love Bill and Frank's story in The Last of Us, you want something very similar to that, I highly recommend All That's Left in the World. The next question is newest favorite character. Honestly, there's so much. I'm just gonna stick to 2. The first one is Kenan from As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. He's just the sweetest person in the world. He cares about his siblings so much, but he's also like super socially aware and he wants to make a significant change that can help his country. Kind of similar to him, but on a very different kind of journey, is Robin Swift from Babel. Even though a very common criticism of the characters in Babel is that they're kind of caricatures and there's not really a lot of depth to them, and they mostly serve as mouthpieces for R.F. Kuang to kind of discuss, you know, what she wants to explore. Robin Swift was just very incredibly relatable to me because he is Chinese, but he was raised in this kind of elite society in England. But as he learns more about translation and how that is a tool of colonization, it is also a form of betrayal to his people, the Chinese. I just found that to be incredibly relatable, not necessarily in the same way or in the same topic that Robin Swift was kind of unlearning, but I found that very incredibly relatable to my experience when I was kind of unlearning some things that I grew up believing in the religion I grew up in, and it was just so relatable. Like, he was just so relatable as a character, like the confusion that he has and the anger at feeling like you've been cheated because you've been lied to your whole life. That was just so palpable in the story, and I just love Robin Swift so much as a character. He's probably one of those characters that I relate to the most, like, that I've ever read. The next question is a book that made you cry. I'm just gonna go back to As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. I already talked about it, but also Babel. Babel made me cry, not as hard as Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, but Babel also made me very emotional. Like, by the end, or towards the end, my heart was just, it felt so tight. It felt like something was gripping it, and I was just so emotional because of the way that things ended with that book. It's kind of a bittersweet ending, but it made me cry for sure. The next question is a book that made you happy, and that has to be Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and illustrated by Faith Erin Hicks. This is just so wholesome. It was so good. It made me so happy. It is so sweet. It's about these two characters. I forgot their names actually. They work at this pumpkin patch, and it's the last day of like the pumpkin patch season, I guess, and they want to make the most out of it. And it was just so sweet and so wholesome. And I don't know, for some reason, as I read it, there were some parts where I was like, this is kind of cheesy, but it works for me. It's just so sweet and wholesome. This made me smile from ear to ear, and I highly recommend it. If you're wanting like a cozy autumn read, Pumpkinheads is your best bet. The next question is, what is the most beautiful book that you purchased this year? And I'm gonna do two. The first one is Chloe and the Kaishao Boys. Like, I love this cover. It works so well. The art is so nice. I love the different characters. I haven't read this yet, but I'll read it soon, which is following Chloe, who is Chinese-Filipino or Filipino-Chinese, and her dad sets her up to go on these dates. I think that's what Kaishao means. They're like matchmaking dates or something like that. But yeah, I just think that this is super cute and super beautiful. Like, this cover is just very uplifting in a way. And then the other one is this book, Big Tree by Brian Selznick. Mostly because I love the naked hardback. I mean, it's kind of similar to the Just Jacket, but I just love that art. It's just so cute and colorful. I love the feel of this book. I've already read this one and it was so good. Brian Selznick, if you didn't know, is one of my favorite authors, if not my favorite author, and this was a solid book for me. This is probably my least favorite book of his so far, but it's still really good. This book is about two sycamore tree seeds and how they survive extinction. It's just so cute. It's following how they survive, like they weather like so many calamities and that sort of thing, and how they, you know, protect each other because they're brother and sister sycamore seeds. It's just so cute. And finally, the last question is, what are some books that you're hoping to get to before the end of the year? So there are a few. I think I want to read Dragon Rider by Cornelia Funke, Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. Those are the three main books that I want to read before the end of the year, but I have plenty of time, so I think I'll get to all of those. That is it for the Midyear Freakout tag. I enjoyed this so much. I enjoyed talking about some of the books that I loved and some of the books that I didn't love as much. I'm excited for the rest of the reading year because I'm super determined to read as many of the books in my physical TBR that I shared with you in the previous video, and I'm just excited to read more good books. Let me know down below in the comments how your reading year has been going so far. Let me know what your favorite book is so far. That is it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Go like and subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!